Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So I was just reading this article from Wall Street on Parade, and it was a conversation between Congressman Foster and was it Foster and Randy Quarles of the Federal Reserve. Very interesting little blip in here in this article that they're talking about as far as this conversation goes, because Randy Quarles is talking about a clearinghouse for the U.S. Treasuries. Now, back in March, when everything started crashing and the stock market was going down and everything was going in lockdown and gold was going down and U.S. Treasuries were going down. What Randy was saying at the time, what Randy Quarles was saying, is that everybody was selling. There wasn't enough buyers out there. And now the primary dealers out there, the big banks, they can put on a bunch of these treasuries onto their balance sheet, but they can only take on so much, and it becomes very stressful for them. And so during that time, there was ultimately more sellers than there were buyers. And when you have more sellers than buyers, the prices go down and the interest rates go up. This is a very damaging effect to the economy. If these interest rates go up, less people can take out loans. It becomes more stressful on small businesses to be able to function on a month-to-month basis. Everything gets tougher in the economy if interest rates go up. The only people who benefit from it are the savers. Now, as these interest rates started to go up, the Federal Reserve was like, okay, so we're going to step into quantitative easing and pump in a bunch of money into the system and, start buying up these treasuries again. But when they do that, they buy them through the secondary market, through those primary dealers. So what they're saying is that so many treasuries now exist, and there's so many people out there throughout the world that when they go to sell during these times of panic, that basically there's not enough buyers out there to be able to absorb the sheer amount of sellers that are out there. So the Federal Reserve wants to build a clearinghouse that can be the buyer of these panic situations when these guys go to start selling. So if there's a buyer, they can keep the interest rates from going up because they're buying them at basically an inflated price. I mean, if you follow free market, fundamentals really, if you have buyers and sellers out there and there's more sellers than buyers, then prices go down. I mean, you allow that to happen, eventually people will find the deal, start buying in, and then the prices will start going up. Eventually, they find their middle ground and equilibrium happens. But when you have the Federal Reserve stepping in and saying, well, we really can't allow these interest rates to rise, and it's because there's so many buyers out there, we're going to have to build this new facility that basically buys all these treasuries from these people and keeps the interest rates from going skyrocketing and keeps the prices up on these U.S. treasuries. Now, this is basically monetizing the debt. Okay? Because if you cannot find a buyer for your debt, then you have to pay a higher interest rate for it. The Federal Reserve was never meant to go straight to the government and buy that debt. And even in this clearinghouse situation, they wouldn't be. But if you have more sellers out there than you have buyers, when it comes to the United States government to be able to sell more debt, new fresh debt, into the market, they would have to basically sell it at a discount so that the interest rates would be more attractive to the investor who is already selling out. So yes, it is like monetizing the debt. Very much so. If you create a market demand that doesn't truly exist, or you basically obscure the selling of debt, allowing the government to continue to go deeper into debt with cheaper interest rates because they have this artificial buyer, essentially the Fed, to do the clearinghouse. They don't have this, but they only have to talk about it. They talk about it a few times, talk about what a great deal it is, watch a panic situation where they said, see, told you, if we had this clearinghouse, then none of this would be happening right now. Eventually it comes into play. They figure out the laws, the congressmen agree to it, they change the laws, however it works. They will make it happen. They just need to talk about it enough and say, see, showed you. So yeah, I mean, they are going to definitely start monetizing the debt at some point. Keep an eye on that. That is a critical point if this happens, okay? Because it's just so close to doing it that they might as well. And you think about it, with this in conjunction with this whole digital currency that's coming out, because there's another thing that they're not, the Federal Reserve is not supposed to do, is directly inject money into the system. They're not supposed to print up a bunch of money and just go dumping it out of a helicopter. Like Helicopter Ben, the helicopter money. That is something that the Federal Reserve is basically, they're forbidden from doing that. They have no, that's not in their charter. They cannot do that. Okay? But somehow they're starting to work on laws right now that say, hey, if, maybe unemployment gets to a certain level or GDP gets to a certain level, we can have these special bonds that the government has issued that the Federal Reserve can buy. And instead of taking that money and giving it to the government, they can inject it directly into the people through a digital wallet. These are plans that they are talking about. I mean, this isn't stuff that I'm making up. This is stuff coming from the Federal Reserve. This is talk that's coming from them. So when you think about it, when you got Randy Quarles like trying to figure out a way to start monetizing the debt, in a roundabout way, not exactly, not really, but kinda. And you got this way of like directly injecting money into the system, not really, because it's the government, because you got to buy that debt from the government first, but it's a special bond. It only exists during unusual and exigent circumstances. This is a telling sign of stuff to come. When you have direct monetization of the debt and direct injection of money to the people from the central bank, you're looking at some very scary times in the future. That's like the end game. That's like the last moves that they can do. How long that goes, who knows? I mean, who knows how long and carry on with this that they can go, and who's and the tricks that they can play in between. But this is how they die. This is when they go direct monetization of the debt and injection of money into the system. It's hard to turn away from that. Once you have started down that road, you can't really just turn that around without completely just crashing everything. So it's a one-way street once this starts happening. And it's pretty much there already. I mean, you can't really reverse it. Look what happens when interest rates rise. Everything just goes, haywire and chaotic, and it just starts falling apart. So the Federal Reserve is already, they haven't even gone, I think they're supposed to, meet again in December or something like that and talk about what they're going to do as far as monetary policy goes. But they're already, there's chatter out there in the news articles about how they're going to go step into more quantitative easing before that even comes. They're going to have to kick in their efforts ahead of that, before that meeting. I mean, that tells you that things are not going to go well. And if we go into another lockdown, like Oregon is locked down, like the restaurants, you can't go and do dining, restaurants any longer. There's a whole bunch of limitations on what you can do. The gatherings are, limited and stuff like that. I mean, I work at a retail store. We're okay busy, but you can already tell that people are really slowing down on what they're going to be doing as far as projects, and they're going to be saving their money, because if we go into another lockdown, it's going to get difficult, and we're going into the holiday seasons, and that sucks. That's going to suck for a lot of people, and there's no better way to pass laws and make things happen inside of the government than to cause a bunch of pain to the people. And if they are in the middle of a holiday with no money and no job and lockdown, that's a lot of pain that they're going to be experiencing. And who's there to rescue them? But the government, the Fed, and those stimulus packages and stuff. Okay, I got to go back to work. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.